Hello, I am your host Angelina and you are listening to V.I.P podcast, where we talk about very important people, ponies and pooches. So this episode is actually very interesting, and I love and hated the idea of this episode because this could have gone one of two ways. The way I kind of didn't really want it to go was, so like when you get scared because something goes wrong and, you know, like you're riding and you fall off, or you know, there's a traffic accident and you're walking towards it and you can't turn around. You know, that sort of stuff. Like, you're worried about something and that scares you. I didn't really want to go down that route today. So I wanted the more ghost story type, like, scary. And I was worried when I was researching this because I was looking at stories that people had to tell. And when I typed in scary horse stories, it came up with the stuff when they got scared when they were riding their horse or there's an accident or whatever. And I was like, that's not what I meant by scary. So I had to really dig deep into this one. And there's one really popular one, which we'll get to in a bit, which never heard of, and I'm surprised I hadn't. So yeah, for some reason I really like a good chilling ghost story, but I understand they can be extremely upsetting. So I would like to warn our listeners now that there will be some terrifying, scary and gruesome details that are brought up in this episode. So if you aren't into horror or gore, then I would give this episode a miss. Sorry about that. Also, I'd like to say that I have tried to find stories that claim to be true. Obviously, sometimes it can be believed to be true by some, but not all. So if you like to believe this sort of stuff, or are really into ghost stories, etc., then do enjoy. If you don't, then you can still listen and make your own theories up anyway. Okay, so let's start off with this incredibly creepy and kind of nasty tale called The Haunted Horse Stables. So I watched the YouTube video where this story is explained and they show you what the believer is like. It's reenacted footage basically, with the woman telling the story. You know, she portrays it really well. Again, I'm not sure if this is the same woman or just an actress, but this video and the story gave me the chills, literal chills. This story is fairly popular from what I can tell, with a lot of believers, because I was looking at the comments and things, and a lot of people say, oh my god, and like, you know, they were just basically agreeing, and then they were telling her what happened to them and like how it relates and whatever. So yeah, there's a lot of believers. Basically, a woman was out looking after her 5 horses. It was her first time out in the early morning by herself in this barn. So I feel like they're fairly new to the barn, I'm guessing. I think they must have recently moved. Anyway, she was preparing the horses' morning for hard feeds and started getting her horses in. So one of the fillies walked into the barn, but absolutely point blank refused to enter its stall. With that, the woman turned around to see if she could figure out why the filly wasn't entering the stall, and she saw a tall man, and he turned and entered the feed room. So he turned and walked off. Like, what? Like, she's on her own. She totally believes she's on her own, but this is happening. Okay. So she followed him, naturally. I don't know what happened to the horse. Did she let it go? I don't. Did she eventually get it in the stable? I don't know about that one. But she followed him, calling out to him, basically saying, what are you doing? Naturally. I'd be running the opposite way, but yeah. She reached the feed room with a pitchfork in hand that she grabbed on her way there, and the man was gone. Just vanished, yeah? So that was that, and then the lights began flickering, and then doors around her, like these were heavy, like sliding, shutting stable doors, and they all just started slamming shut. Then she just ran, like as fast as she could. She's running down the alleyway of these stables in the barn, and all these stable doors were like crashing and slamming shut. The woman said that the doors were heavy, like I said, and she was scared of like, if this man could slam these massive metal heavy stable doors shut, and multiple times, so, like, she was terrified of what he could do to her. Imagine the amount of strength you have to have. Creepy, right? So she managed to escape and get to a car, where then she drove to the other barn and waited. She got her friend to come with her when it turned daylight and did whatever she needed to do. The woman then refused to go in the barn on her own from that morning onwards. You know, she was refused, which I don't particularly blame her, but at the same time, I can't believe she'd still keep her horses in there. Like, what? Like, you'd get them out, wouldn't you? But anyways, she only went in there when there were other people and in the day, and only if she really had to. But, you know, when she went in, she kept it brief. She didn't stick around. So later on, I don't know how much further on, different day, I believe, her friend asked her to look after some dogs. She said she would, but when she had the dogs, she said, "Would you mind if I keep them in the stall for a few hours overnight?" When the two of them went to get the dogs in the morning, there was blood all over the wall. And I'm like, oh my god, when I heard that, I had goosebumps. I was like, oh my god, no, the dogs! And it was the dogs, because I kind of predicted that this sort of thing was going to happen. Because why would you go and leave dogs in there if there's a man going around? Like, yeah, slamming metal heavy doors. Why would you leave dogs? Well, one, he could have let them out, but that's not the point. Yeah, so I don't know why she would leave the dogs in there in the first place, but you know, especially if she's not comfortable to go in there herself, and especially at night, so she leaves the dogs in there at night. Makes sense, right? I don't think so. So anyway, there was this dog who had whip slashes all over his back, you know, and I'm just like, oh my god. Like, how has this happened? You know, like, I don't understand why you would do it in the first place, and if you were to do it, you wouldn't have just left it. Well, I suppose she said it was a few hours, but a lot can happen in a few hours, obviously. So, disgusting. I don't know why anyone would do that to an animal, dead or alive. The dog was thankfully still alive and was taken to get veterinary attention. So I think that turned out to be quite expensive as well. Not quite sure. She did say, I think, but the slashes were like fairly bad. So yeah. For those of you that don't believe in this story, her explanation as to why she believes it was paranormal was that the fences and the gate were very high around the perimeter with spikes on top. Yeah, they had spikes on top. She claimed that it was nearly impossible for someone to break in, let alone without her knowing. Now, I don't care what was going on paranormally or if someone was able to get into that yard. I would not keep my animals there. They were too precious to me. Like, just seeing someone creeping around, like, especially if I thought it was paranormal, I would get my horses and not take any dogs into that barn. I'd be like, no, we're leaving, we're moving, I don't care. You know, I don't know what to think about this story personally, because I haven't gone deep into what happened, but in my head, I can think of a few possibilities. Obviously, there's not a lot of background information on the people telling the story in the video I watched, so I couldn't make judgment from that. So obviously I have questions running through my head. Now, don't judge me for this, but I like listening to mysteries, dark history and murder mystery podcasts while I'm doing my yard work. And you kind of get to the stage where whenever you're told a mystery, or if it's unsolved especially, you then start coming up with possibilities. And did anyone rule out the idea that it could have been someone on the inside that was scaring her? Or perhaps was it all in her head? Maybe it was a cover-up for what happened to the dogs. Like, maybe she did something to the dogs, or maybe the dogs had a scrap, I don't know. But maybe she did something to the dogs and it was a cover-up. I don't know her, so I don't want to accuse her of anything, obviously. You know, I'm not accusing anyone or suggesting anything because, like I said, I haven't researched this further. And obviously I'd need to know background information, and I'm not a police officer, I don't know, but it's just, you know, when they come up with like, oh, could this have happened? Like, that's kind of what I like to do with like mysteries anyway. So if you are interested in this story, then go and look it up. And if there isn't in fact any more like details and into the background and stuff, then let me know what you think happened, because I'd like to know what you all think happened. Yeah, that'd be great. Anyway, so let's move on to the next tale. So this story, when I read it, it seemed to be written by the person who experienced this themselves. This story is called The Headless Horse. And it took place on White Horse Lane, which was a big part of this rider's hacking when they were growing up. Apparently, it was a long, windy road which was always strangely quiet and often had a strange smell about it. Anyways, this rider would rarely ride on this lane at night, but when they did, they hated it. This road was supposedly named after the angry white horse who haunts it. Apparently, during the English Civil War, a farmer who supported the royals was beheaded, and then his head was stuck on a spike. Naturally, of course. After the farmer was murdered, they then tried to steal his horse. See, now you've got to murder him, now you're trying to steal his horse. How cruel can you be? I guess you wouldn't want to leave it around to starve. I don't know if that's what their reason was, but I don't think so. When the horse refused to come with them, the horse was then beheaded too. This is a bit drastic if you ask me. Like, just let the poor animal go? You just killed his owner. Just let him free? The white horse has since wandered White Horse Lane at night, intimidating anyone who crosses his path. Apparently, it is common that most horses won't put a foot on that road at night as well, so it's quite interesting. So there was a photo that came with this story. In the photo that was attached, the rider claims that this is her shadow. But the whole photo, like the image, just confuses me a bit slightly, because he or she didn't mention another horse or rider being out with them in the first place, and in the descriptions of this, like they never mentioned the headless horse having a rider, so that it was just a headless horse. And obviously he had the farmer, but the farmer was headless too. And in the photo, yeah, the farmer was supposed to be headless too, right? And in the photo there's 3 horses, 1 headless, and 3 riders, but all 3 have heads. And I'm just like, so there's 1 extra rider than was than what was said to be in the story, and you've also got a farmer that was supposed to have this horse with a head when he was also beheaded. So that, yeah, obviously I don't know what happened as I wasn't there, but I would love to know what you all think. My partner, when I showed him the image, thought it may have been staged one, so which is definitely a possibility. They might have turned the horse's head enough to make it look as though it was headless. The other thing that didn't make a whole lot of sense was that the rider claimed that this happened at night, but there was clearly daylight in the image, and there obviously has to be a light source for a shadow to be cast in the first place. But then it could be argued that this image was taken in the evening while it was still light in the summertime or something. Also depends where around White Horse Lane is, I'm not sure. But yeah, so it's an interesting story, but there's a lot of things I can pick out that don't quite make me believe it. I believe that there is I believe the tale behind it. I just don't believe the image taken, perhaps. Maybe it's just an image that she had or he had, and yeah, definitely. I don't know what to think about that one. I will be putting the links in the descriptions because I do think it's a good idea for you to have a look to see what you believe in, because I would want to. So yeah, take a look and see what you think about the image. I could be totally wrong, maybe it is at night time, I don't know. Okay, so this story is based in the Orkney Islands of Scotland. One of the islands is home to a land called Clumley. Not many people visit the small town due to bad weather, it being a bad location, or what some believe to be the real reason, which is because of the White Horse of Clumley. So on certain nights it is believed that a ghostly white horse of Clumley and its phantom rider come to reenact the events of what happened on a dark night long ago. Interesting. So naturally, one wants to know what happened on that dark night long ago, don't we? Apparently, it was when two men fought over the affections of a fair lady. So then, like the boss she is, after they finish fighting, for now, she rejects the both of them. But unfortunately, they both fought until one was dead. Anyway, makes sense, right? She doesn't want either of you, but they're still going to fight to the death. So the killer then proceeded to hide the body of the other man in a stable until darkness fell. When he saddled up a white horse, of course it's a white horse, every single one of these stories always has a white horse, I swear. So when he saddled up the white horse, he laid the body on the saddle, hopped on, and then rode off into the night. So apparently there was a high wall that separated the town of Clumley and the rest of the island, but he was able to persuade the horse to jump over it without jostling the dead body out of place. Naturally, of course, it worked, because totally. And afterwards they continued on their way. They finally reached a cliff, and when they did, the killer threw the dead body over and into the sea. The killer decided to stay on his horse and catch a breath, but a few seconds later he saw the form of the man he murdered forming in the sea foam below him. And then the foamy form started making its way to the killer. Naturally, the killer was terrified, as you would be, but you shouldn't have done the bad thing in the first place. So he was terrified with this and booted the white horse until it reached a gallop, and then made him take further and further away from this foam figure. After a while, the tall wall around Clumley came into view. The killer made the decision that the horse will jump the wall, as he had already done it once. So naturally, you just assume the horse is going to do something. I mean, especially when it's a massive, God knows how high wall. But anyway, just think about it for a moment. This horse had been taken, jumped a huge wall and carried two men to that cliff, then booted into a gallop and galloped all the way back, probably stressed too, and then was supposed to make the jump at full speed with less energy, no time to actually think about where to put your legs in the stride and whatnot. There wasn't even enough time for the horse to prepare striding, like I said, and because of this, the horse crashed into the wall and it crumbled. Both the horse and the killer died. What's even more interesting and weird is that according to the story, every time the people of Clumley tried to repair the wall where the white horse crashed through it, the stones would fall back out of place. Apparently, to this day, the wall still has a gap. Dun dun dun! So they reenact and they break down the wall every time. Lovely. Okay, So I'm now going to move on to a very well-known story. I'm sure you must have heard of this at the very least. Or if you are like me, then you've heard of the name and seen images shared online at Halloween. This is a tale of the Headless Horseman. So naturally, when a tale is popular, different variations tend to form. So depending on what folklore you choose to believe or prefer will obviously change what you know or what you choose to believe in. So in American folklore, the Headless Horseman is a fictional character from the Legend of the Sleepy Hollow, which is a short story from 1820s. I believe there was also a film made based off this called Sleepy Hollow. The Headless Horseman is also known as the Headless Hessian, I think that's how it's pronounced, of the Hollow. The traditional folklore legend is that the horseman was a Hessian trooper. For those that don't know what one of those are, because I didn't either, had to research further. They were approximately 30,000 German troops that were hired by the British to help fight during the American Revolution. This particular Hessian trooper was killed during Battle of the White Plains in 1776. How did he die, you ask? Well, unfortunately, he was decapitated by an American cannonball. Lovely. His head shattered, remains all everywhere, they were left on the battlefield, while his comrades hastily carried his body away. So his head exploded into a million pieces across the battlefield, but the comrades took the body, and they carried his body away, and his body was eventually buried in the cemetery of the Old Dutch Church of Sleepy Hollow. And this is a horror episode, so naturally it's expected that he didn't just rest in peace. He then, of course, rises as a malevolent ghost, furiously seeking his lost head and wielding a jack-o'-lantern as a temporary replacement and such a weapon. Modern versions of this story says he rises to Halloween, which is near when the battle took place. I mean, I understand him for wanting his head back, but after years and years, wouldn't it have been buried by nature itself? And what would it have done? What would he have done if he managed to get all the pieces? I guess he could then rest in peace. I wonder if the books tell you, the tale and the whole. I wonder if they hold the answers to my questions here right now. So, there was a 14th century poem written, Gawain and the Green Knight, I think it's called. It features a headless horseman who is the giant knight who, after he was beheaded by Gawain, he proceeds to lift his own head up with one hand and rides from the hall, challenging Gawain to meet him again a year later. Okay, let's take a look into the Irish folklore surrounding the Headless Horseman, otherwise known in this folklore as something I cannot pronounce. What's new? But it translates to Dark Man. In this tale, he is a headless demonic fairy who usually carried his head in his arm and rode on horseback. Apparently, he wields a whip made from human corpse spines. Why? Just why? When he stops riding at any point, a death always occurred. He calls out a name, and then the person whose name was called, they would basically just drop dead immediately. I guess he is like a grim reaper of sorts, he declares who is going to die. Not great, is it? In another version of this Irish folklore, he is a headless driver of a black carriage, but in this version he allows some chance for you to scare him away. So, if you scare him away, it states that he can be scared off if you wear gold or if you put a gold object in his path. I mean, I wonder why he wouldn't go near gold. Like, wouldn't you rather gold? Payment in full, please. Well, you'd keep gold around, wouldn't you, for that, wouldn't you? I must say, I do love a lot of the artwork, the modern artwork of the Headless Horseman. It does look pretty awesome. So if you ever get a chance, go and have a look. It's pretty awesome, like I say. Anyways, so let's move on. So this folklore is known across Central, Western and Northern Europe. So this one is the Wild Hunt. So this is the tale of a ghostly leader and his group of hunters and hounds flying through the cold night sky. They naturally are accompanied by the sounds of the howling wind, just to spook everyone out that little bit more. If you hear howling in the wind tonight, maybe take cover. There are a few different views as to what these supernatural hunters are. Some say they are dead, some think elves, and others think they are fairies, etc. You know, if you tend to take a more realistic view of these kind of things, or at least what you think is more realistic, some people say that the Wild Hunt is a synonym for the winter storms or changes of season. Anyhow, the hunt was believed to pass through the forest in the coldest, stormiest times of year. If they found anyone outside at their time of passing, they would be swept up into the hunting party involuntarily and sometimes dropped miles from their original location. People who practiced magic may have sought to join in with the berserkers in spirit while their bodies remained safely at home. So this myth started off quite innocent, actually, as it was originally believed that the hunt was led by a god or goddess that was visiting the land during the holy holiday, bringing blessings and accepting offers from people. They could be heard by the people because of the howling winds. Later on, though, it became known that they were a pack of ghouls with malicious intent. Bit of a turnaround, don't you think? I won't go into who the leader is too much because there are many different beliefs from what areas and, different areas, different time periods. But it was believed by most, after the translations were done, of all the different beliefs, that, the majority, it turned out that it was believed that the leader was the master of Yule. For those that don't know what Yule is the festival celebrating the changes of the seasons, which kind of links to what I was saying before. Although I said I won't go into too much detail about all the different names and beliefs of the leaders that were believed to be in charge of the Wild Hunt, I do want to just cover the basic and most common tales of how he became the leader of the Wild Hunt. So, in the 16th century, it was believed that Hans von Hackenberg, I think that's how you say it, was the leader of the hunt. Apparently, it all started when he was slaying a boar and accidentally pierced his foot on the boar's tusk, which then poisoned him. When he died, he then declared that he didn't want to go to heaven, but in fact continue with his treasured sport. So naturally, because I guess God saw him being ungrateful, he was then forced to hunt for eternity in the night sky. So Wales' version of how the leader became says that it was actually Gwyn ap Nudd. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologise if not. So that name is obviously Welsh, but it translates to the Lord of the Dead. He is followed by a pack of hounds with blood-red ears. In the English version of who the leader is much the same as the Welsh version, but only they believe that the hounds were white with red blood ears, and the hounds were known as Gabriel hounds, actually. They are believed to be a sign/warning of doom, so at least they warned you, right? The English also believe that the leader is Herne the Hunter. I think that's how it's said. as you can see, they have the same kind of beliefs, just a slightly different twist. Some more examples are that the Orkney Island, oh, that's the same as where Clumley is. There you are. That their tradition speaks of fairies and ghosts coming out at night and galloping on white horses. In France, their version of the goddess of death is said to be the leader of the hunt. Now, going back to Orkney Island, that is the same place as the Clumley town is, and that was also a white horse. So they have a lot going on with white horses and fairies and death and foam. So, Jesus. Anyway, so there is so much more on the wild hunt that you can learn about, as it is believed across the world. In modern paganism, they still believe in the wild hunt to this day and incorporate them into their practices today. For all of those spooky tales I've told you today, I will leave the links in the description so you can read up more on the tales of old. Or if you have your own theories on what happened, for example, in the story of the haunted horse stables, then there is a video you can analyse. If you do have your theories, do let us know about them. I'd love to know, because you might have a better theory than me, and I would love that. Because honestly, I'd love to solve this. If it can be solved, it might just be a ghost, and that's it. So, yeah, thank you for joining me on this episode of Horsey Horror. And before I finish, I meant to tell you that in the haunted horse stables story, the background information on the ghost is that the woman researched it, and apparently back in the day there was an old feud thing. So there was this guy, he was a stable hand, and the rider didn't like him at all. So he hit him around the head, and blamed a horse for kicking him in the head, and he died, obviously, but it was blamed on the horse, and the guy never got justice. So maybe he just doesn't like people in the stables now because he doesn't trust them, which is fair enough. You can do more research on that. Like I said, I will put the link to the video, and you can have a look at what you believe and don't believe. So again, thank you for joining me on this episode of Horsey Horror. I will see you next time. Bye!